Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm recording. Uh, Let us give them a few minutes. So immediately at 8:15, we shall begin our session. I'm recording. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. So for the meantime, you can be networking on the chat session, see what you do, and your specialty as we wait for the others to come.
Yes. I've heard our admin say that we should start networking, but I see everyone is quiet. Huh? Are we all introverts? Ama ni namna gani? So let me begin by introducing myself. You all know me. I'm John Gondi. I'm the IT manager, NW Realite. So at NW Realite, we deal with property management. So in case you are blessed, you have apartments, we manage them. If you have commercial properties, we manage them. Some of the most identifiable properties that we manage is a property like KCB Towers. It's in Nairobi, Upper Hill Road. Some properties like Race Course Gardens, that is in Gong Road. Very nice apartments. Those are the kind of things that we do. So we do property management and facilities management. I would also like to hear some of you where you work and what you do. And those who are in college, what are you studying?
Okay, so I'm Kembo Elvis, the host of Laravel Kenya. I am a Laravel developer view, also developer. So I'm currently studying software engineering at Kisii University. Thank you.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, I'm Mesha Kikwet, software engineer. Actually, I can say it's a fresh graduate from just campus, but also I can say I'm a Python developer, but I love to know about Laravel. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Meshak.
Hello, guys.
Hi, Stephen. Hi, Stephen.
Yeah, hello. My name is Steven. I'm a software engineering. Been working for 2 years now using Laravel, and I'm happy to be here. I want to listen from you guys. What's going on in the field? New features, advanced features. How we can build full stack applications using Laravel. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I see it's already 8:15. I think we can start. Uh, we can continue networking on the chat. Let's talk about ourselves, what we do. You never know, maybe even if you don't work in a software development company, you sell some other products, someone might be interested here. So put it in the chat and we will talk. Okay, so if you allow me, I would like to present my screen now. Getting back to our topic, so I'm going to talk about basically, I'm going to talk about the repository pattern. So we will understand what the repository pattern is, how to implement it in Laravel, and why we need it. So as you can see, I've underlined IN. It's because this topic is a bit, most people would even consider it controversial. Because when you are talking about Laravel and then you are telling someone to be independent of Eloquent, it sounds a bit controversial because uh, I think eloquent is that is where Laravel came from. It came from eloquent. So I myself personally, I use repository pattern, but not as heavily as I should. I should use it. Most of my projects, for the rest of their lifetime, they remain working with the same database. So I never get to change, but I always implement the repository pattern just in case a time comes and you are required to change your data source or you are required to change the object relation mapping tool that you use. So I use the repository pattern for that. So what is the repository pattern? So this is a design pattern that isolates the data layer from the rest of the application. So we are isolating the data layer from the rest of the application. The data layer is where your data is stored and where how your data is retrieved. So let's look at an example of a normal developer's index method in your controller. I'm going to use the same example I was using in the last presentation, talking about the posts. So inside the index method, first of all, we authorize the user, make sure that the user is able to view all the posts. Then we fetch all the posts using the posts all static method, which is provided by eloquent models. So you will always find the all method, which fetches all the records from the database. And then we return a view with the data. So if you look at this code, there is nothing with this code. It looks good, it looks okay, but we are very dependent on eloquent in this case. In case in future you decide to change the data source, you will have to update your uh, you'll have to update your controller methods again, and every part that you have used post or static method, you will have to rewrite that code again. So we need to switch to a repository pattern so that we can free ourselves from that stress or stop thinking, what if the data changes? What will I do? What if the data source changes? What will I do? So we have to introduce the repository pattern, and we also have to do it right. Some people will just do a class, a service class, and then they call it a repository, and then that's where they fetch the data. But that is not the right way. So the first step is to create an interface or a contract with the methods that we will use to interact with our data source. So these methods can include like all create, update, and delete methods, basically the CRUD methods. Then after we have created a contract, our interface, we create a concrete implementation. In this case, a concrete implementation or implementations. So for every data source, we have a concrete implementation for that data source. Then after that, we bind the concrete implementation in the service container so that at every point in our app, we have the data source. We have the concrete implementation of the data source somewhere. Then we have to resolve it by injecting it in your controllers, in your job method. So you inject uh, our interface into our controller methods. In most cases, the controller constructor method. So let us look at the contract or the interface that we have to create. This is how it looks like. So we have post repository contract. So I like calling all my interfaces, I like calling them contract. This term was introduced, I think the first time I saw it for myself it was from the Laravel source code. So they have used a lot of contracts. So a contract is basically an interface, or it's an interface that you implement on other classes. And those classes, it's like they have signed a contract to implement the said methods or to have a certain design pattern. So our contract will have a method to fetch all the records from the database, which returns a collection. So for every concrete implementation that we do for our post repository must contain the all method. Then after that, we have these other methods. The get by method, this is where you specify your column and in other words, the conditions that you need. For example, the where methods, this is where they will be. Then you have the create method, which receives attributes and then returns a post. Then we have an update method, which receives the ID of the record and then the attributes that need to be updated, and it also returns the post. And then we have a delete method, which also returns the post. So let me be honest here. Just a minute, I find. Only attack. Okay, so sorry about that. I was looking for my highlighter, so I need to highlight some things. So I have to be honest with you. I think I did something that I should not have done. So here we should not have post because we don't know the data source at this point. And by saying post, we mean that we are going to get a model. So in this case, we should just say an object. An object is okay. If we want to cast it, we can cast it later on. So this one should be object. So I pulled this code from some of my code that I had written for the same thing and started editing it. And also this one should be object rather than post, because at this point we don't know whether we are interacting with Eloquent or any other ORM. We may be using something like a custom. Maybe we have our own custom object relation mapping, or maybe something like doctrine. So we cannot use post at this point. We just say object, but we can use collection because we know collection is not part of Eloquent, but it's part of Laravel, and we are developing a Laravel application. So after you have created your contract and you have given the signature of your methods and how those methods should be implemented, we go to the next step. So we have our contract. We go to the next step, which is creating the concrete implementations of our contract. So let us start with a repository for Eloquent. So this repository will specifically interact with Eloquent ORM. It will use the MySQL data source or any other data source that is compatible with Eloquent. And then we fetch the data using the Eloquent methods. Then we can also create another concrete implementation for our custom ORM. So for this one, we use custom ORM post repository, and we also implement our all function and those other methods. Of course, I'm not going to implement them here. I'm just going to deal with the all method. The others, the same pattern will follow. So as you can see here, we implement the all method, and then inside the all method, we return our post. Because we are using Eloquent here, we can easily call post all, and it will return a collection of all posts. I've said post repository. I've not added, for example, Eloquent post repository because by default we will be using Eloquent. So I've just called it post repository. Then on this other one, we call our custom model. So our ORM has different model, doesn't have to be called post like the models in Eloquent. It might be called something else. And maybe the method for that ORM is get all records instead of all. So we are calling this method to get all the posts, and then again we return a collection. So after that, we make sure that all the the concrete implementations, they implement this post repository contract. They all have that contract because this is what we will be using to resolve our this is what we'll be using to resolve our implementations from our service container. So they must all implement post repository contract, the contract that we created. And that contract, we know that for every concrete implementation, there will be all method, and then there are those other methods that create, get by, update, and delete. So after that, after we have our concrete implementations, we go to the next step, which is binding the concrete implementations in the service container. So this is where we will create our repository service provider. Resolve our repositories. So inside there, we first of all we import our abstract contract, this one, the interface, and then we import our repositories. So we have the repository for post repository, and then another repository for custom ORM post repository. And then down here, inside the register method of our service provider, we have to bind that implementation, concrete implementation, to our abstract implementation. So we know when we need the data, we just call post repository contract, and then our service container will have to figure out which ORM we are using and then give us the data from that data source. So we might use something like some conditions. We can add some conditions to determine the kind of to determine which concrete implementations to resolve. So in this case, I'm just resolving the post repository for Eloquent, but maybe inside our config, we might add something in a environment variable. We say for post repository, the data source should be this. So at any given time, we can have multiple data sources for different resources, but at the end of the day, all our app cares about is getting the data. It doesn't care where the data is coming from. So inside here we do have some conditions, and then uh, we resolve with the data source that we want depending on our config. So in this case, I'm only returning the post repository. In case so when you request post repository contract, you will be given post repository. So you will always know that the data that you are getting is from the post repository. So after we have after binding our data, we go to the next step, which is to resolve the implementations by injecting them in your controller. So here, put it all together. You come to your controller, you import the the contract here, and then inside your constructor, you initialize the post repository. So we are initializing this one, post repository contract. So the system will figure out which one, our service container will figure out which one, according to our configuration, which one it will give us, and then it will return it inside this object, which is the post repository object. And then inside that object, now we can call the all method. The reason we are calling all method with confidence is because we know whichever concrete implementation we are given for the repository, it must have the all method because this contract has says that you have to implement the all method. So we know there will always be all method for all the implementations that we receive. So we make sure that the user is authorized to access the data. Then we pull our data, and then we return the data with our view, and that's it. That's all you have to do for repository pattern. It's as simple as that. It's not rocket science. Then that's all you have to do to get the post repository pattern. But I know some of you are wondering what is happening. Why are we doing all that? What is happening in that whole thing? So think of it this way. We have our controller. All our controller wants is to give the user the posts that are available. So the controller doesn't care where the data is coming from. It doesn't care whether the data is coming from API, whether the data is coming from some other data source, or whether it's coming from Eloquent, or whether it's coming from maybe something like say Doctrine, or any custom implementation of your ORM. All it wants is a collection of posts. So our controller says, okay, I need data. So it implements the contract for, it implements the post repository contract. So our service container, forgive me, I have used this Kubernetes icon to mean service container. I didn't have any other icon to use. So our container does its thing, and then it spits out an object, which is the post repository. So it tells us, okay, here is something that you can use to get the posts. It does not tell us where the data is coming from. It just tells us, here, use this, you will get your data. So all we do is we call the all method. We say, okay, we need the data. Give me all the posts. Then the all method inside our concrete implementations interacts with the ORM that it's interacting with. We don't care where that data is coming from. Maybe it's coming from an API, maybe it's coming from somewhere else. So the all method inside the concrete implementation is the one that knows where to get the data. So it fetches the data from the data source, and then it gives us the posts. So it's as simple as that. We request the service container for a data source. The service container tells us, okay, here is the post repository. Get your posts from there. You call the all method from the post repository. The all method inside the concrete implementation interacts with the ORM and fetches the data from the data source. And then it gives us a collection of the posts. That's all that happens. So why do we need why do that all that work? Why do we need the repository pattern in Laravel when we have a pretty good object relation mapping tool that is Eloquent? Why do we need all these other things? Why do we need the repository pattern? Because it allows us to use the principle of dependency inversion, that is abstraction over concretion. In this case, all our controller cares about is the abstract part of the application. It says, okay, all I need is the data. I don't care where that data comes from. Then our service container is the one that resolves based on our configurations. So let's say maybe in our config, or maybe in our what is it called? Maybe in our environment variables, we have something like post. We have a post data data source is equals to, if I say, for example, Eloquent, it will use Eloquent to fetch the data. If I say API, it will use the API concrete implementation to fetch the data. So our service container will look at the data source, and then it will implement the concrete implementation for that data source. It will not by default give us, say, Eloquent, or just take Eloquent. No, it will look at our configurations, and then it will give us that. And that is what we were doing when we were binding. So we did bind our abstract implementation to a certain concrete implementation. So we request for an abstract implementation, we are given a concrete. And then after that, so this keeps the code organized and helps avoid duplication because the database related logic is kept in one place. So that's what I was talking about. If you are using just directly, you are using your ORM in your controller, then it means every place that there is post all, in case you change the database, then you have to start changing that data again. And also, in case you want to do some before you, let's say for example, when you are retrieving the all, in case you wanted your data to be modified in a way that maybe you are giving people posts with title and subject. Say you are giving title, subject, and then the body, and also an image. Then you want to modify that instead of giving the full image, you want to give the what is it called, this more image thumbnail. Then it means you will have to edit that logic everywhere you are fetching the posts, which is not good. So in the best case is to use the repository, and then you will only edit in the repository where you return the image as the thumbnail instead of having to do it in every place where you have called it. Then the last thing is testability. So we all know any application, especially when you get out there and you start developing for organizations or in a bigger team, testing becomes very important. The ability for other developers to test your code becomes very, very important. And I don't mean feature tests like end-to-end tests, I mean unit tests. Unit tests is where I know all I need to get in the controller is I need a collection of data. So I don't really need, when testing, I don't really need, when unit testing, I don't really need to connect to the database to get those posts. I can fake my own data. Then to fake your data, you will just implement your own, a concrete implementation of your own for testing. You can call it testing post repository. And then you just create an array of some posts, and then you give it something like you convert it into a collection, and then you test if your controller is getting the collection that it requires once it tries to resolve from the service container. So testability is very important, and that is where uh, I mean that is where the oh my god, I've forgotten. That is where the repository pattern becomes very important when we are doing testing. So I know this is very shallow. I know I've also been fast, uh, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the repository pattern, how to implement it, and how to and why it is important. What it is, how to implement it the right way, and why it is important. Uh, So that's all for this course, unless there are some questions which I expect, or maybe a comment. If I've been very fast, let me know. I know we have wasted some few minutes there waiting for the guys to join. So I've decided to be a bit fast, but I see we still have a lot of time remaining. We have like 16 minutes. So please ask your questions. I'm here to answer them. Guys, are you still there?
Yeah, we're still here. So thank you for the presentation. For me, I don't think I have a question as for now. I don't know if anyone has a question. I think you can unmute, and then you can ask your question. Or if you have Any question from the previous sessions only also?
Yes, hello, John.
Okay, yeah. Hi, Steve.
Hi. Nice presentation on the repository pattern in design. I have a few comments. It's a good approach in development. As I can see, you can use different data sources. You can specify whatever you want from your configs or whatever place you may define it in your application. I had one question about this this uh, this approach you're using. How do you handle, how do we call it? How do you handle uh, performance here? Performance, because performance is one of the major things. When you're building applications, once you start having millions of data over time, like data keeps growing over and over time, how do you handle um, performance issues, your site load time? Now these things come into play while using the application. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, John. Still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I was talking while I was muted. So, here, I think I have not explained very well. So, just because I'm saying post all,
Hmm.
that doesn't mean you will go and implement post all. So, in your case, you will also have to include some things inside the all method, things like page, how many items do you require per page? Do you want to have pagination? Remember, you are implementing something on top of the existing eloquent existing uh, data source. So you have to figure out how to structure your data. So in this case, I've just used a simple example that is common to all, something that is simple, that is easier to present. I have not gone deeper into things like how to optimize these queries that are fetching the data. I've not added things like paginations. I've not added things like cursors. So I've decided just to be simple and just return all the posts. But when you are doing the implementation now as a developer, you will have to the optimizations that you do in any other case. Remember, even if we are not using the repository pattern, if you are requesting post all from from the controller, you would still need to do some optimizations to make sure that the data you are fetching is will not keep the user waiting, or you have an optimized way to fetch your data or search your data. So remember, this is just I'm just showing you the basic implementation, but the actual implementation you will have to do the same optimizations that you do in the project in other cases. So I believe at some point we will have a talk on optimization, on how to be efficient when you are fetching data from the database, how to deal with things like n plus one queries, and things like that. So the course was just about the repository pattern and how to implement it, but not the actual optimization. That is a lesson for some other time.
Yes, thank you, John. I think that's clear. We need to, at least one of these coming time, create solutions for optimization and reducing site load time, things such as using caches on your models and etc. I think that, yeah, it's something we need to talk about in some other sessions. Thank you.
While we are here, we might keep saying it's something that we need to do some other session that how do you feel about giving us a talk about that, maybe in collaboration with someone? So, sometimes when those questions come up and they were not on the topic, we can have someone, at that time you volunteer, you give us a small talk about optimization if you do understand it well. We would also appreciate to hear from you and other developers. So what do you think, Stephen? Do you think you can cover that sometime?
Maybe we'll plan for that. We can plan for that.
Okay. So thank you for the question. Any other question? Emmanuel? Emmanuel?
Hello.
Yeah.
I did just a simple project using these repositories. So maybe I can share my screen so I can demonstrate what I did, and maybe I can ask you some questions. So if I did it right or wrong, it's just a to-do application. Yes.
Okay. Sure. Let me stop presentation here.
Okay.
So, yes, I am able to see your screen.
Okay, so the code is on GitHub, so I don't have it local, so I opened it using this. So what I did, it was just a symbol to do applications. Actually, what made me learn the repositories was that there was this interview I went, and they asked me if I knew anything about repositories. For me, I didn't know, so I didn't know. So that's how I failed. There were some other questions like resources. I don't know if you all know about these resources. Maybe we can talk about also some other day. So for today, let me just focus on these repositories. So this was just a symbol to do application. Here is the repository classes. As I don't know, I just forgot your name. The presenter. He said you. I hope you all remember how he said you have to create an interface class. They are now the class repository itself. So for me, it was a task repository. So he demonstrated only using all. So I had, for me, I used, and here you can see I imported this repository here. So for example, now when getting a task for a specific user, this is how I used it using a repository. So normally what you would have done here is you just do this, something like this if you are not using the, or if you are using the relationships, you can just use, and I'm not sure if I implemented relationships here. So normally what you would have done here is something like this, if I'm not wrong. Then maybe return the response depending on how you, yeah, like that. So, but since we are using the repositories and you are separating that, is it that data logic and the business logic? So you have separated the data access, the access logic. You have pushed it to the repository. So how to access now? I use this function get task by user. That's the name I called it. So when you go to your repository, you will see here get task by user. Then you pass in the user, and then now get the user's task. I'm sure I will have just used the eloquent relationships here to make it simpler, but this was sometimes back when I was still learning. Same way, finding a specific task. That's how I did it in the controller. Show task and then find task. So all this data will be passed to your controller, and you will manage all your access logic inside this repository. So I'm not sure if I did it the right way, or you can just comment. Or this was sometimes back when I was still learning. I can make the GitHub repository public if you all need to access it.
Okay, so thank you for sharing. And that's very brave of you to share a live code. So I looking at it, I don't see any big challenges. I see for a basic app, it looks okay. I don't see any issue. Uh, all I can ask is, would you mind showing me the provider, the service provider where you are
Uh,
binding the
yeah.
mm,
Uh, which one? The
uh, I think in
is
your
it
case you used the app. Okay, yeah, I
option?
see.
Oh yeah,
You are
yeah.
using a
I think
binding.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You also have to.
So I
Is
would
it?
advise,
Yeah.
since repositories they get some, they might end up becoming so many. So you create a service provider specifically for repositories. Just call it a repository service provider, and you will, and then you move this logic for binding the task repository to that service provider, and you will be good. I don't see any other issue.
So you don't have to register it here inside the app service provider.
No, you can create another service provider for repositories, and then inside the register method of that service provider is where you bind, you do the binding.
Oh, okay. I will check on that.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Maybe I can stop sharing.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing. Uh, so let me see about those spoke and said about their careers. I might ask. So I see Emmanuel, you have shared. Yeah, so Usula is a friend of mine. We have been working together. She's a student at ACAU taking software engineering. Glad to have the opportunity to network and learn. So yeah, Usula, I think our organizer here, he has shared the link to our WhatsApp group and our Twitter. You can also join us there. In case you feel you have something to say, you can ask a question or make a comment. So then,
Okay.
yes, please go on. So the other person was Meshach Yegon. Meshach, he has just graduated from Catholic University of East Africa. The past 2 months, also looking for internship. If a position is fitting him, you should hit him up. He's doing Python and PHP functional, not Laravel. That one is a call PHP developer and Python developer. In case you have something, you can hit him up. Then we have so then our YouTube channel link, I think it has also been shared where we will upload this video. So in case there is something else, please ask. Then someone, Alvin Lavu, says that he thinks someone should talk about WebSockets, which is very important, by the way. So if we have someone who is able to volunteer at the moment, please do. For me, I'm doing at least bi-weekly rather than doing every week, so that we can have someone talk. So is there anyone who is willing to do a talk on WebSockets?
Okay, so I think if anyone will want to talk about WebSockets, I think you'll just say in the group
Yeah.
so that you can arrange on the next week's presentation or something like that. Also, we had an idea where we wanted to have a Laravel in person meetup. So I think currently we are looking for suggestions and let's say some sponsors to sponsor the meetup or something like that, where we can have a meetup and talk about Laravel and have also some sessions and some speakers. If you like to be a speaker, I think you can just hit me up. So I think if you I'm open to ideas, you can say if it's a good idea or how we can go about it. I think it will be a great opportunity for people to meet and network. As I see, because most of the people here are students and others have finished, I think it will be a good opportunity to meet people who are in the job sector and also people who have built some great systems. I think it will be a good. So if you can sponsor the event or you can, I think it's a community based. So like whatever you have, you can just put it in the meetup so that it can be a successful meetup and we'll appreciate it highly. So I think for today's session, I think we are done unless anyone has a suggestion or any other issue on any business. Thank you.
Yeah, I was asking for are the slides available for the presentation?
So the slides are shared, slides and video and any other resource, they are shared the following day. So yeah, they'll be available and some sample code on GitHub. So they will be shared the following day, like tomorrow. But in this case, I might be late. Tomorrow I have a board meeting. So let's see about on Friday. I will share them on Friday.
Okay, so thank you for attending. I hope you had a great session and you've learned something. So thank you. And once again, we really appreciate your presence here. Thank you very much. I think you're free to leave at your own time.